I'm going to point out some of the corrections that need to be made on this file and some of the possible things that you can start to play around with. So if I just have a look at the screenshots of your channels, the first thing I want to point out is things like this, so the levels, because it's, oh actually it may be clipped, just make sure that anything like this, the levels or any of these adjustment layers you play with, are clipped to the layers below it. Now, the next thing is if we look at this image, I don't want any of this stuff here. There's obviously a mistake where you've drawn on the layer instead of on the mask, and so it's degraded this image. If we have a look at the next one, we can see that it's happening right across the board. So here, you've probably tried to mask this image, and actually what you've done is you've deleted around the text. So this has destroyed the actual image, and it no longer matters whether the mask is on there or not. And we've got the same thing happening down here. There's been some erasing on the image when you've probably been trying to work on the mask. So all of the stuff here, you need to redo it. There can't be any holes on the layers or on the images themselves. These ones here, I'll show you just how to join all these layers up rather than having a whole ton of layer upon layer upon layer. We'll work out how we can join these together and play with them in a slightly different way through the channels. We have a look at the channels. There's no extra alpha channels in here, so that's something that you have to change. We have to have some form of masking coming through the channels. So let's have a look. So we've got your image. I've done a kind of pseudo mock-up of the same sort of thing. So the first thing we're going to look at is this image in the background. So this kind of square, the square boxes. So if I click on one of these layers, I can go Command E, and it will merge it with the layer directly underneath it. So if I go Command E again, this will join with this. I'll keep going, Command E, and actually there must be a whole lot of other layers further up. So I'll get this one, I'll just check, yep, it's that little corner there. So Command E, and I'm just merging them all together so I don't have tons and tons of unnecessary layers because they're all kind of doing the same thing. So now I've got everything on the one layer. Now I think what you've probably done is you've used a function like multiply to give you this quality over here. What we're going to do is, with an image like this, I want it done through the channels rather than it being this kind of what this one is, which is a kind of a white box and then using multiply. We need to have something in the channel, so I'm going to use this. So I'm going to select this whole image and I'm going to cut it. I go into the channels, I make a new channel and I paste it. My one's actually got a wee bit of grey, so I'm going to go to the levels and I'm going to brighten up the white so it gets rid of that. Tidy the blacks a little. Go OK, and then I'm going to go Command I. I can load the selection. I leave that there, I don't delete it or anything, into the layers. Go to my layer, and in this case I'm just going to start off with black and go Option Delete, which fills with the foreground color, Command D, and I can see it. Now I know that on your one there's some black, there's blues, there's various colors. What I'll get you to do is now we're utilizing the channels. We've got it with transparency, and I'll make a new layer above it. And here I can get the paintbrush tool, hard or soft, whatever I want, but I'll get my colors from here. So I'm going to go make a slightly bigger brush, and I'm just going to scribble on here, get another color, I mean, I can carefully go around the boxes if I want it to be like the one on the other page, getting specific boxes for the sake of speed. I'm just scribbling on it a bit. And okay, I'll go like that. Now if I hold down the Option key, it's going to clip that color to the panels underneath, and we can see that it's got those colors coming through. I can still come in here and go multiply. That way I can change the or maybe I can try screen, something giving a different quality. I can still go through and play with all of these options. Overlay is quite nice as well. But for the sake of this, I'll just go back up to multiply, and I can dilute it down a little bit if I want. Now, to advance this a little bit more, if I come back and I have a look at this area, it kind of goes right across the board. Okay, it's behind some objects, it's in front of others. I would make that a little bit more subtle detail to it. So if we come up here, maybe we can put a mask on it, and we can say, okay, I don't want it to, completely cover his body. I'm just making the brush a bit softer, give it a softer edge. Maybe I don't want it over that bit, but I do want it over the front of his mask. Remember, you can always use the figure as a mask. So if I go Command and I click on that mask, oops, that's the wrong one, that's the other kid. Here we go. Command, get the mask for him. Then I've got control over it. It means I can come back to this kind of pattern. I'm on the mask, and I can rub it and have a lot more control over it. Okay, so it comes in, it hits his arm and it stops, but it's still going over his fist. Command D. So just a little more control than the kind of all over one single layer kind of patterning. Like, you could mask this text so it goes behind this text, but it comes over the top on this side. And if we look at the text, this was one of the ones where it was cut out. Because it was cut out of an image, text can be really hard to deal with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a slightly different way to mask something like that. I've got an option here called Type. Now I can select around this, and actually it does a pretty good job. But another way to select things that can be quite good is to go Select and to use a color rather than trying to use the selection tools. This has almost done it straight away. If I click on the background, the fuzziness controls how much it's going to select. So the white is what it's going to select. So I can see the background's dirty. I can use the plus and click on those areas. If I hold down the Option key, it'll go reset, so it'll start again. So I'll click on the red, and actually what I'm going to control it with is just the fuzziness. I'm just going to move that up until I get what looks pretty good is a white and a black. I'll go OK. I can click the mask. Okay, it's the wrong way around, so I know I just click on the mask and I go Command I. Got this layer, mask now, whoops, not putting it on your image, I'm putting it on this one. Copy it across. Oh, okay. it's in there. It just automatically came up clipped option. Clip it just so that it was where I had the layer, so it just came up in that position. I'm just going to scale it and chuck it in there. Hit return, and then the adjustment layers that I was talking about. In this case, I'm going to go to hue and saturation. I'm going to colorize it. The first thing I do is I just close that option, clip it. Then when I go and I double click, I'll see it happening live and I know exactly what I'm changing. So here, I think you had red text. So I'm going to colorize it, bump the saturation up, lighten it down a bit, and I can see what the difference is here. Now it looked like you were starting to bring a little bit of texture on, but you were doing it through the layers. So I want you to get used to the idea of using these channels a wee bit more. So I've got a drawing here. I'm going to select all, I'm going to cut it. I don't need to save it anymore because I'm going to paste it in here. So channels, new channel. I always start off with white, so I'm going to go Command, Delete, fill it with the background color. Command V. Actually, maybe I'll scale it up a bit rather than down, so I can just get some kind of interesting patterns. I can go to the levels just to make sure that it's nice and white. I don't want to get rid of too much of that grey, so I'll lighten it a bit and pull the blacks up. Go OK. With a white paintbrush, just going to get rid of these extra ones around the edge. I'm just making the brush harder so it doesn't fuzz all over the place. So this is what I've ended up with. Command I. So two things now that I've got that I can make the selection. I can come into the layers, and actually I'm going to go on to the one of Robin. I can still, I can't scale it that way actually, otherwise it's going to move the image. But I can move it around by getting a selection tool, and when I get the arrow, there we go, the arrow with the square. It's a bit hard because it's so thin there. So I'm going to come down here. I'm just going to have a little bit of this texture going over Robin. Command D. Oh, sorry, Command D, which fills it with black. I know black's going to block it out. Sorry, Command Delete, fill with the background color. So it's filling black in here. Command D to get rid of that selection, and I can see how it's starting to pull bits out of Robin. You can do that with some of these paintbrushes as well. Some of these customized brushes. I've got one here. Actually, one of my ones that I've made, and I can click on Robin. The foreground's black. Looking at this boot area up here, it's just kind of degraded into it a bit. Chip into his leg a wee bit. And you start to get some interesting patterns starting to happen. I can go back to the channels. machine's slowing down a bit, so I'll just have to do a little bit separately. I can go back to this, and at the same time I can switch on the eye level so I can see exactly what I want. If I want, I can do things like I can duplicate that channel, switch on the eye beside RGB so I can see it, because what I'm going to do now is Command T. I'm going to scale this down a bit so I can see exactly the size that I'm going to get here. Switch the eyes off so I can see it here, load it up, come back to my layers, and I come down to the cow now, and Option Delete, which is fill with black, and I get a little bit of degradation coming in here. One more, I'll go back up to the top robin, I'll make a new layer just above them. Channels, I've got this big alpha channel, I'll load it, come back to the layers, and this time I'm going to, what should I do actually? I'll load it up as a mask. So it's there as a mask, but I've got nothing on the layer yet, so I can't see anything happening. And this is just so I can go and get a colourful graduation, check it in there, and you can see now that that colour is being controlled by the mask. As an overlay, I can do multiply or find something that I think works well. Maybe I'll go vivid light. I can clip it. So it's clipped onto Robin so you can see it over his face. And the thing is as well is I can also come in here with these two things merged together, and I can scale it. Command T. And you'll actually see, and if I move it around, you can just see it over his face. I'll come in, I'll just move in that around until I get something that I like. Okay, so this really is just about controlling the layers and the masks. So looking at the stuff, so we've got adjustment layers. We're now using the channels. So we have some alpha channels in here. That's what was missing off your file before. And we haven't got any of these images where we've accidentally chopped out on them. Now I'm going to put a PDF up on Trello, and it's going to talk about some of the design fundamentals, contrast, scale, hierarchy, some of these things. Remember to always come back to that stuff that you've learned previously. So when I look at this, how's it going to show us? It's getting a bit flattened overall because it's not taking into consideration kind of negative space. It's becoming a bit like wallpaper and all over covering. So we are going to start to play around with it so it becomes more of a composition. There's a few things I'm just going to clean up here. So I can see the sky tower sticking out where I don't want it to be. Now what can I do? This probably becomes more dynamic when it's only showing half of it. Does it matter if the writing makes sense? No, because it's at this stage it's about composition and playing with that side of things. So the one in the background, maybe it's a wee bit distracting. With this foreground, you start to lose focus. So I'll come to the second image, and maybe this is one where I need to, rather than just using the multiply, I'll try playing with the color balance. Now, if I cool it down a bit, still not too cooled off, we've got that, clip it so it's not affecting the blue in the background, and then maybe with the opacity of him, oops, that's just doing the opacity on the colors, the opacity of him. And I would say that probably just for me changing the color a bit, and then I'd actually go in and do something to degrade that image a wee bit. So again, if I come back to these brushes, or you can use it, a texture. Black is the foreground color, then eating away at it. Starts to bring the focus back onto this guy here. Oops, what did I do that for? I'm just simply looking at the wrong image. I'm supposed to be looking at this one up the top. I was looking to think that maybe that's a bit too distracting, so I might switch that one off. What happens if the edge is taken off the cow a little bit? And then the main one for me, I would say, would be the negative and the positive. So I would come in here. I'll get I can try with that brush as well, black, and I'll change the brush back to a normal one. So I'm just trying to bring some negative space back into this image. And on this side, you can obviously do it with a bit more detail, knowing exactly where you are going to chop these things out. And maybe I'll take all of this area out. So if now bring these two images, I'll just try and move this one over a little bit. Let's try to get them side by side. So maybe the figure here could be lightened up a little bit more. I saw that you had the levels on it, but a wee bit more. But basically what we're trying to do is compositionally, there's now a bit more of a focus. you have Robin. Your eye gets caught on the sky tower. You hit the text, and then these other things become slightly secondary. Here, there's not a huge difference between all these things, and then the background is quite dark, and so compositionally, your eye gets a bit distracted. Everything kind of flattens out a wee bit. So I would say compositionally, trying to give a bit more negative space and define these areas a wee bit more so that there is a focus to your illustration.